Okay, both cylinders are off now. So the next section we're going to do is take the clutch cover off and start to disassemble that side of the crankcase. Small cover here for your oil filter. Just take the top out off. Again, watching the surfaces. Of course, oil's going to go everywhere here. Okay, there she comes. That's the oil filter cover and the oil filter. Just put it aside. Go over there with the screws. Okay, that's all the screws out of the clutch cover. That should come off. Loosen her up a little bit. And again, they've got, actually on the cover, they've got like a little notch to get your screwdriver in without damaging the casing. So this cover should now just come off. Got all new gaskets for these. Should always replace the gaskets. And there's our clutch cover off. Okay, the next thing we're going to do now we've got this cover off is to get this clutch off. So I'm just going to knock the tab up off this primary gear so I can get onto the spanner on it. Just using the screwdriver. Tap that up out of the way. Lovely. Next we'll take these clutch bolts out, those tension bolts. Okay, that's them out. Just pull this pressure cover, plate cover off. It's a little bit stuck there. That's it. Keeping those plates, other plates together. And behind here we've got a thrust bearing. Goes on with the rod. We've got a thrust bearing here, you can see that, and like a rod on it. And that fits inside the plate here, like so. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is get this nut off. So I pull this rod out, which I've just found out can only go this way because it's got this sort of little spiral end on it, on the end. Let's put that aside. Next we'll knock the tab washer up on the nut. Okay. Next I shall pull the clutch plates out and just place them on top of the pressure plate. The next thing we're going to do is hold this hub. So I'm going to have to make, I haven't got the special tool, so we're going to have to make something up to hold this as I undo this nut. Okay, I've made the holding tool from the drawing that's in the maintenance manual. So that's going to go in here like this. And then I'll hold that as I knock the nut. So I'll just get that set up and we'll give it a go. Okay, I've got the holding tool on the center hub, got the socket on with a piece of bar. I'm holding that Let's see how we go. There we go. Yep, let's see. So, yeah, that little tool does work. Just be careful of these castings, but it got me out of trouble. So now I'm going to pull the basket off the shaft. Okay, as it comes off, there's a castellated washer behind it. Basket. Put that here. I'm going to put all these plates back into the basket so we don't get these mixed up. So that came off like that, so this is going back on like that. So that's all my clutch plates there, my push rod, everything's together there. So I'll put that in a plastic bag and label it clutch, and that'll be good. So now I'll just pull the outer hub off. That just comes straight off. Springs behind there, and basket is complete. That can actually go in there. Next thing to remove is the cam chain gears. So I'm going to just remove them. There's just a nut here that comes out. I've got like a little horseshoe keeper plate. Hold it on. That comes off. And then the shaft should just pull out. And the shaft comes out. And then the gear with the chain. Now yeah, I've still got to look at this, but that gear has got an R on it. I'm thinking rear. So keep these together. Make sure, actually it says in the book to label them. Next, undo the lock nut for the rear cam chain guide. And that just comes out. It's just got like a dimple on it which holds the guide shaft in place. These all get labelled, and you want to mix these up. So I'll take this cover off, this side. And the last one. That should be it. One thing you don't want to forget too is the neutral wire. It goes right on the bottom of the crankcase, but it is connected to the cover, so that's got to be disconnected. Just looking at this, the XV1000 has a different starter motor arrangement than the 750s. Where the solenoid comes through a cover like this for the starting motor. So I'll take this cover off, and you can't get the cover off because this arm that connects the solenoid to the shifting mechanism is still connected. So you've got to undo that, and you've got to undo a screw here to get this arm out, and then it should come off. And this screw that holds on the solenoid arm to the shifting mechanism, it's got one of those special security star screws on it, so fortunately I've got one. So we'll try and get this off. Yeah, there she goes. So we'll screw this out. Now it's got a shoulder on behind it, so this screw does have to come off here as well. Okay, that one's come out. So okay, that screw comes out. And then this should now come off. Like so. And then this piece, that sort of locks it in. So you can't pull the cover off because of that arm. So this has got to come out of that actuating arm. So now the cover should come off. Just want to keep that together. That's that starting mechanism. But there's the cover off now. So yeah, that's the XV1000 isn't the same as the 750s. Okay, the shifting mechanism fell out in pieces where they pulled the cover off, but basically that's it there. There's a seal on the back, the gears, the shifting fork, and the next things to do is to get the actual starter out itself, which is, it's got this cover on it here and a circlip. So I'll just take the circlip off. Okay, there we go. So we've got a circlip, and then this cover gear comes off. Yeah, and this is probably different than 750s. This is off the 1000. It's got this, I don't know what it is actually, but it's a gear and maybe a spring or something in there, or a one-way bearing. Yeah, it's a one-way bearing. So that comes out, and then the starting motor should just tap out because I've got the bolts off the back of that. Yeah, so there's the starting motor that turns this big beast over. Okay, we'll do the same on the rear cam chain here. Bolt out. And the keeper plate. Shaft. Cam chain will come out. Now this one hasn't got any lettering on it, on this cam. The other one's got an R on it. This has got nothing on it. Now for the guide. Comes out, and the bolt, and bag these ones up rear cam. Okay, the next thing I've got to get off is the dreaded flywheel or alternator, sorry, flywheel alternator, and I've made up this holding device which goes into the holes where the puller goes into, and I've got a hole in here to get the socket on, so it should be nice and solid. So I'll try and free it off with a hammer. There we go. Tighten that nut. Okay, nuts off. While I've got this held, I'm going to go around the other side and take off the primary gear drive nut. So, let's flip that around. So it's a we'll take this nut off the primary drive gears. Didn't have a 36mm socket, but I did have a small spanner that was tucked away in the shed, so I might give this a go. Okay, that's got it. And there's that nut off. Okay, there's my holding tool. It's just a piece of old round plate I found in the shed. Put a hole in the middle of it to get over that nut, and a bit of pipe on the end of it to stop this lot from turning. Now I've taken the nut off, and there's a washer on behind it, a thick washer. That comes off, and I'm putting the nut back on because I'm about to install the puller. And you jacking on the end of the crankshaft, you want the nut on because you can, if you don't, you could end up splitting the crankshaft. So yeah, put the nut back on, and also to catch it when it comes off. Okay guys, I've got the nut off the other side. I've got the puller onto the alternator, all nice and square. I'm going to put this screwdriver in here to stop it from turning. I'm going to start tightening this up. Give it a belt with a hammer every now and then. Don't be too shy to hit it. There we go. And that's it. That come off pretty easy. I have seen some guys on YouTube where they've had a hell of a job getting them off, but fingers crossed, that went pretty well. But yeah, it's definitely get everything lined up, put some pressure on it, and keep belting with a hammer on the end, and have your nut on there. That's a must. And actually on this puller, I didn't actually use a sort of cone like that. I just used a flat inverted got a kind of a dimple in it, which went over just nicely over the end of the shaft and onto the nut, because, and then you're just pulling on there. Okay. So okay, off with the. Well, I'm just looking at the springs that are in the back of that flywheel. Yeah, I thought they were broken, but they're not actually. They're just a couple of little springs, and they've got little pins inside them. So watch them as you take the flywheel off; they'll fall out. So yeah, they can go back in. You can see the back of the flywheel there. They've got these these little springs with little pins inside them. So I've just put there, I thought they were broken, but they're not actually. They're yeah, just those two little springs with two little pins inside on each one. So just taking a closer look at the alternator flywheel, when I did pull it off, you've got your gear behind it, which is actually connected in here, but as I pulled it off, these little springs and pins fell out. So if it does come off, this must go back in the right position. See, we do have a timing dot here, and we have a timing inspection hole here, and it's saying in the book that make sure the mark on the gear aligns with the hole in the rotor. So there's the mark here for the gear, hole in the rotor here, so we have to line that up. Let's check that other side, like that, and then press it in. And that's it in. Springs are holding it in place. So yeah, hole on the gear aligned with the inspection hole on the rotor, and we'll be using that inspection hole later in timing all the cam. Next we take the driven sprocket off. I've just put an Allen key in here to hold the sprocket as it goes round, and just crack this bolt. Like so. And that sprocket comes off. And we can take the chain off. Chain comes off, sprocket off. Bolt can go back on the pump. Then the next thing we're going to do is the 3 cap-head screws for the pump, holding the pump in place. And that's the pump loose. The pump should come out now. And the pump should now just pull out. See? And it says to be careful not to damage the strainer as you take it out. And there's a strainer there. That looks pretty clean actually. Not too bad. And there's the oil pump out. A couple of O-rings behind here and a dowel as well. Next is the shift mechanism. We'll take that off. Just pull this arm down, this arm on the shift drum, and just gently pull this out. The whole lot comes out in one piece, like so. And something just dropped down there. There's a washer on the back of that. Yeah, here we go. That washer goes on the back, and that goes on there. Well, guys, that's pretty much the 2 sides of the crankcase strip now. We do have the oil pump sprocket that goes onto the crankshaft there. Now I was going to take that off, but in the manual it says that if you do take it off, it should be replaced with a new one. So I thought about it, and it's in good nick, and the bearings behind it, the big roller bearings, they look pretty good, but I'll check them out when I pull the crank out, which will be the next thing we do. But that will come out with the crankshaft. You know, the main thing I really want to do with the crankshaft is pull the con rods off and have a look at the white metal bearings and check the tolerances on them. But I did make this puller up, and I thought well, if you do want to take it off, I'll show you the homemade puller I made to get it off. And the next thing I've got to do is probably take it out of this frame now and lay it down flat to separate the two halves. That'll be the next thing. So yeah, this homemade puller was just basically a plate with a hole in it, and they were going to slot behind the sprocket there like that, and then this other plate would go over the top and be bolted to those back plates, and then the the actual puller itself would go through with two 8mm high tensile bolts and pull that off. But at this stage, you can do it later if I want to, but at this stage I'm going to just take the crank out of the casing and leave that on, because I'm suspecting that bearing, that big roller, is going to be okay. I've now taken the motor out of the frame and just sat it on these two pieces of wood, and the next thing is to get the bolts out of the casing. And the bolts, they have an undo sequence from 19 through to 1, and Yamaha have kindly actually labelled each hole or bolt position with a number. So the next thing you get is start getting these Allen screws out of this case and get this case separated. Here goes 11, and then we're on to 10. Okay, that's all 19 bolts out, so just I'll give her a tap just to free her up a bit. Okay, I'm getting the cases apart now, just tapping on each end here like this. I'm just wriggling the cases apart now, with it sitting like this on its side, and you can see that she's starting to come apart here. Trying to keep things in place, you know. Okay, so there we have the clutch side off. Okay, clutch side is off. Let's put that gently down here. Now I'm just going to sit this side back up on the blocks. Okay, so that's the cases split. Next thing is to just get the components out, get them inspected. So just looking down on the two cases, we've got a few things to watch out for. We have a little orifice there, probably for the oil pump. Got a dowel over here, and we've got an O-ring that goes in there, which is that one there. Now just to keep a record of how the cases came apart. Okay guys, I've got this set up. I'm going to take that little sprocket off, oil sprocket. I'm just going to put a bit of heat on it. Get it going. Okay, let's give that a go. Coming. They certainly didn't want it to come off. I tell you what guys, this has been a struggle getting this this sprocket off, oil pump sprocket off the crank. She's on bloody tight, but it is coming. So it's Christmas, they say. I'm actually just using the bolts on the pull it out to get her off. There she goes. Whew. That was on frigging tight. Well, there she is off, but as I said, it was bloody hard getting it off. Yeah, I can't really see why that can't go back on. There's no damage to that at all. It's an interference fit. Should be able to just warm it up and put it back on. And it's in good nick. Yeah, here's a sprocket. Have a look at it. There's not a mark on it. I know I'll be putting this back on. Just warming up, and that'll drop back on. After all, it's only driving a little tiny pump. Next thing I've got to do is tap this crankshaft out of this casing. All I'm going to do is just using the brass dolly on the big end bearing on the outer race. I'm just going to tap it out of the case. Going round in 4 spots. Yeah, it's going quite nicely. There she goes. That's the crankshaft knocked out of the case. And there's the case. Down gently over here. And there's our crankshaft. So I'll put that in the lathe and take these bearings off and just plastic gauge them, see what I like. But yeah, it didn't go too bad. Just that collar, if you're going to get that off, it's on there tight.